Thank you very much for joining us with Semansis on our first webinar that we're running today. We hope that this will become a regular series for us where we're going to run regular webinars, probably on a quarterly basis, on topics in the Xbrl space. For our first webinar that we're running together, we're going to be talking about compliant auditing and accounting processes. My name is Ashish Dash. I'm the Managing Director for Semansis, and I'll be the moderator for this session. With me, I have my colleagues Whitney Monlouis and Michael Van Gendren. Michael will be doing the presentation and the demo, and Whitney is our producer, is helping to make sure that the session goes smoothly for everybody. Today's agenda, we'll be talking about an overview of the processes involved. Basically, we want to speak about these three core processes around accounting and auditing. And this is also from an Xbrl perspective. Then what we're actually going to do is we're going to show these processes within our tool so that you can see exactly what an accountant or auditor will do. And after which we'll actually have a Q&A session then. If you have any questions anytime during the session, you can go ahead and submit those in the webinar chat. We've also received a few over email, so we'll cover all the questions at the end of the session. So feel free to add to the chat and one of us will pick up the messages there. I'd like to give a quick overview of the three processes that Michael will be demoing today, just so that you understand or kind of conceptualize where this falls into place. The first process that we're going to be talking about is the compliance process regarding the happy flow, if we call it that way. And it's basically where a user, and this is typically an accountant or auditor or a financial controller, needs to submit a business report. Basically, when we say business report, we mean Xbrl. In this case, they're uploading that Xbrl instance to our product, and then the product is actually doing a validation. And this is what we're saying in our terminology is making sure that the report is compliant and that make sure that everything regarding Xbrl and the validation of Xbrl, we produce certain artifacts to guarantee its compliance, if you will. What we also do, and this is basically a necessity to make sure that a validated report can be delivered to the regulator. Unvalid reports cannot be delivered to the regulator. Additionally, the validation compliance reports can also be included both internally and externally, and these we'll go through very briefly in our demo later. We'll also be demonstrating what we call the unhappy flow. So what happens not only when everything works well, but also what happens when it doesn't work well. So in this case, we'll actually have errors that are detected. And in this case, the same user is uploading an Xbrl, and in there, they're actually getting technical faults or formula validation faults or any other types of issues that might be in this instance. And then the user can actually look at the specifics regarding each part of the errors within the tool itself and look at these reports for validation. And of course, this is a necessity to make sure that the report that's generated and is created can actually be delivered to the regulatory body, because invalid Xbrl will be rejected by regulatory bodies. Yep. We also consider this as part of our double check process. A lot of users and companies that we work with in the enterprise space often need 4I, 6I principle on their business reporting. And this is an important aspect that the tool provide the right level of artifacts in this to support it. The next process that we'll actually be demonstrating here is what we call the uniformation process, but it's basically the regulatory filing unhappy flow. And in this case, the Xbrl is actually being uploaded to our system, but in this very specific case, we recognize that the Xbrl is not compliant for the regulatory body. So where you could be Xbrl compliant according to Xbrl specification, then you know that the regulatory body actually requires more than the specification or differences to the specification. And because every regulatory body is different, we provide the functionality that allows you to pick and choose how you uniform from a valid Xbrl to a uniform Xbrl for that regulatory body. So we're actually going to provide that go through that process also, which will actually show you how we render a new Xbrl instance that's required for this reporting process here. With that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Michael Van Genderen, who's the product manager for Semansis. And in his role, he's been working for 20 plus years in the Xbrl space, and he's responsible for product and delivery of our products, especially this new product that we're launching, which is compliant. Michael, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Aziz. Good morning, everyone. As Aziz said, my name is Michael Van Genderen, and I will guide you through the process within our application named xbrlOne Compliant Cloud and show the processes just explained by Aziz. I'm going to share my screen. And I will log into the application. And here we are in Compliant Cloud. This application guides the user in an automatic way through all the processes from validations, creating the reports so that the user or the financial accountant or financial person within the organization has enough information to see and to validate if the Xbrl report that is produced is valid so that it can be provided to the regulatory authority. The first step in this is that I want to show the happy flow. I will, in this case, load a Xbrl report and upload it into the system. This report is already produced, but we want to see how that validates and how the content looks like. As soon as the Xbrl report is uploaded into the application, the user clicks on it and it will automatically detect which taxonomy it relates to. It will download, it will make sure all the related taxonomy files are into the system, and automatically all the processes will start here in the bottom of the screen. In this way, the user is not needed to do any technical action whatsoever. The system takes care. As soon as all the steps are done, we can look into the different reports that are produced by the application. One of them is, I click on documents, it's what we call an internal data view. Xbrl is a technical language in nature. It's XML formatted. And to give a little bit more readability towards the user, there is an internal data view. I will scroll a little bit down. So, in this way, it structures all the XML data in such a way that it becomes more readable than the XML file directly. And on the left-hand side, we have some statistics in document. How many facts are reported in the document, how many contacts or units are related to that, and some taxonomy-related information. When we scroll a little bit further down on the page, the report that is visual here can also be downloaded in an HTML file or in a PDF, or the original Xbrl instance can be downloaded again, and that can be distributed internally or saved wherever it is needed to be saved within the organization, or shared where it needs to be shared to external people when needed. The second step is that the system has been executing Xbrl validation. Xbrl validation here executed based on the Xbrl file, that the Xbrl report that was loaded, and executed the core Xbrl validation processes. It's a technical validation where the content of the Xbrl file is validated against the Xbrl specification. And to give us a small example, it can be, for example, it validates if not a string is imported on a numeric fact. That's one of the checks, for example, that is executed, and on the moment that it is detected in the report, the validation report shows the message so that the user is aware, hey, there is something wrong with my Xbrl report provided. In this case, nothing is detected, everything is okay, no errors, no warnings whatsoever, so the report is good. And again, this report can be downloaded for internal or external users where needed. So step one completed. Then we have also dimensional validation. Here, the Xbrl report is validated against the dimensional structures within the taxonomy and reports it in the same way like in the Xbrl reporting. An example here, for example, is if the Xbrl report provided is not containing the correct financial statement type dimensional information, the report will provide a message here, you did something wrong here, so that user is aware and can take action. In this case, we are demonstrating the happy flow. Everything is okay, no errors or no warnings, so the Xbrl report is dimensionally valid. Then we go to the next step, that's formula. Here, the Xbrl report has been validated against assertion rules that are embedded within the taxonomy. In this case, there are 74 assertions executed and validated. And one of the things here, what it does, it does existence checks if, for example, if the balance sheet is in equal amounts on both sides. That is what is validated here. And in this case, there are no errors, no warnings reported, so everything is okay. And here again, the report can be downloaded on the bottom in different formats so that it can be used on different purposes. Until now, we only have seen, let's call it technical validations reports, but the user also wants to see something that's visible and readable and is more recognizable with the financial report that they have been producing. If we go to the render, now we show the content in a readable format, and this helps the user to have a way better view on what is reported. In this case here, we have been creating the consistent presentation. That is a specification to defined in the Netherlands to show all the data that is reported in an Xbrl report in a consistent way, so that everyone is aware of what is reported. There are no facts that are not shown. All the data is presented, and basically it's the true and fair view on the Xbrl report that is produced. And here again, we have an index. We have a content that is reported. In this case, the report is presented in Dutch because the Xbrl report that was provided in this process was also in Dutch. And here again, the output can be downloaded in different formats and be used in further processes. So in this case, it was the happy flow. The Xbrl report that was provided was not containing any error or message. All the reports are automatically created. The user can download the reports, store them, or distribute them, or share them with colleagues internally and externally, was able to see the render and can continue the rest of the process to deliver, for example, the Xbrl report towards their regulator. If you go back to the first step, now I also want to show what happens when something is not correct within the Xbrl report. I upload a second report, and I will start. I select it again, and automatically it detects what taxonomy it needs to load and start producing all the different reports in an automatic way. As we can see, it's following different steps, and it's now in the last step. It's rendering consistently the Xbrl report, and when that's done, it's becoming visible in the application. It's processing. In the meantime, I can click on the document section again, and here it produced the same Xbrl internal data view again with all the content. It shows some of the namespaces, the taxonomy that is used, organizes the context, so at least it's readable instead of the XML file that was sent in for further processing. And here we see, compared to the previous one, we have more facts that are reported. It relates to more units. If we go to Xbrl validation, it executed also the Xbrl validation on core specification, and no errors and critical warnings are found in this process. So that's good to know. Then we go to the dimensional report that is produced, and it's also validated here, and nothing is detected and found. So good news so far. It seems everything okay. So let's see if the assertions are also correctly processed. Oh, and that's not the case. During the validation, there is a message detected, and I will a little bit zoom in. it says there is a specific field, a legal size criteria classification that needs to be presented within the Xbrl report. And that's not the case. So the assertion detected that a field that needs to be presented is not available, so the user has to take action here. The report gives the information, presents it, the user can download this report, go back to the financial department or make the correction where needed, or discuss it, for example, with the external accountant, or the external accountant can discuss it with the organization to take a certain action here to solve the issue. That still means that the Xbrl report can be rendered. So I will scroll down, we have a little bit better view. And here again, the consistent presentation is rendered. We have the index, we have some of the information, and when we scroll down, we have, for example, here we can see the balance sheet that it is reported in that way. This again can be downloaded and shared for further usage. But here the user is informed, hey, there is a message where we have found that something is not presented in the instance document, and the user needs to take a certain action to correct it, because otherwise, for example, when it is sent in, the regulator will reject the Xbrl filing because it's not containing one of the mandatory concepts that is reported. So in this case, we do not have a happy flow because there is something wrong. If we go back, I also want to show what happens when we have the regulatory unhappy detection where something is not uniform. And I will load the document for this. And I will upload it into the system. As soon as the system detects, on the moment I select it for processing, it will start loading the document and prompts a message. Mr. User, we have found that something is not matching the requirements. Do you want to take a certain action? If the user clicks OK, it will apply the correction. And what does it mean? As Aziz also explained, it renders a second instance. The original file remains usable and visible in the system, and we can also use that for processing. But in this case, a secondary instance is created where the correction is added, so that we have the original one, we have a modified instance, and then we can download both of them when that is needed. But here it applies a change. For example, we want to add the Dutch language because the Dutch language is not available in the Xbrl report, and it is mandatory by the regulator. So on the moment I click OK, we see in the system that a second Xbrl report is created. The original is still be there, can also be processed. And it starts processing all the steps again, like in the previous processes, and everything is done and ready now. When we now go to, we can follow the same steps here. We have the internal data view. I will explain it in the next step, my apologies. Then we have the Xbrl report. Hey, there is no detection of something that was wrong. The same on dimension, everything works okay. On formula, we have been executing the formula validation, everything is okay, and we render, and here we have a visual representation of document again. But what has been changed, and that's what I can show here. We have what we call a uniformation log available, and in this case, it reports, all right, we loaded the Xbrl report that was uploaded into the system, and we detected that there was a language attribute missing. So the user provided the action that it was okay to produce or render a second Xbrl report. The language was added, and this report provides what is detected and what is added. And then the rest of the process was continued. I quickly, in one of my previous steps, clicked on the duplicates. What it can also do, for example, in Xbrl, it is allowed that duplicated facts or duplicated units are reported. Most likely, it's an unwanted situation. So what happens in the case that an Xbrl report is provided and is not containing, is containing duplicated items, this report will present them in such a way so that the user knows, hey, I have an instance document provided to the system and there are duplicated facts, or there is a duplicated unit, and this report can help to know what's going on and if a certain action is required to correct this duplication. In that case, when it is available, this report will demonstrate, or no, will not demonstrate, it will show that there is a duplication available in the system and that a certain action needs to take place. So to summarize, I just showed a happy flow, uploaded an Xbrl report, and all the validations are executed. No remarks were found, no validation errors were reported, and the Xbrl report was rendered consistently so that the user was able to see what was provided. Then we had an unhappy flow where one of the technical validations, in this case it was the assertion validation, failed, and there was a mandatory field not reported in the Xbrl report that was provided in the process. And I showed also the uniformation process where a XML language was not available in the instance. That is a mandatory rule of the regulator here in the Netherlands, that it needs to be present for a Chamber of Commerce filing, that the language needs to be set. In this case, we rendered a second instance, applied the correction, and processed all the reports and validations again, and then we finally end up with a happy flow after the uniformation was applied. Thank you for showing and watching the content, and I will hand it back over to Aziz.
Great, thank you very much, Michael. Let me set mine back up and share the presentation. Great. Yeah, again, thanks very much, Michael, for doing that demo of the product and going through those three processes. Extremely useful. We actually have a few questions that have come up during this session. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and publish those questions now for everybody so that you can see those questions in the live event QA. And we also have one in email. So what I'll do is I'll go through the email first here and address that, and then we'll hopefully go back to this. The first question that we have via email that was received was a question on audit data analytics. And this is basically, if I understand the question correctly, is that audit data analytics is using PDF and Excel as the input data right now. And when we were talking about external software, will we see a change from this input into the external software? To answer this question, it's actually a little bit more of a difficult answer to give because every software vendor is slightly different here. Some allow you to bring in PDF and XLS, and some don't allow that or don't support that. So I think the answer here is more per vendor, that the audit data analytics and the integration to your audit data analytics software, and let's call it as your XBRL software, has to be investigated further. But I think overall, you won't see many changes because there's a lot of system-to-system integrations that are in the XBRL space, whether it's Semansis, whether it's Fujitsu, or whether it's many of these other products are in the market. You see a lot of that is available for API to API integrations. So hopefully that answers that first question. The second question is also a follow-up to that question on audit data analytics. And this question goes into a little bit more details from an accounting perspective, is that when working within the digital accounting software, can you dig into the transaction and that anomaly? So let's say that there is a validation error and everything else, you're able to visualize that in an XBRL report, as Michael just demonstrated, but how do you track that back to your accounting software so that you can dive into this? And this is where the XBRL is imported into it, into the ADA software, in this case, the audit data analytics software, but you don't have that link between the source data, which is in your accounting software, and the XBRL data. To answer this, I think I'd like to take a step backwards. We have a lot of domain experts in here, so I'm sure there's some better answers in this. My thought process a little bit at a higher level is, when we start talking about XBRL, right now in its current state, XBRL is a summary of the business report data. So when we talk about line item data, we're actually talking a little bit more about something that's known as called XBRL GL, which stands for, and I hope I get this right, is XBRL General Ledger. And I think, Michael, you might be able to speak a few minutes on that. But basically, once we can start enabling XBRL GL types of integration, reporting, and processes, then you can have the link directly from the accounting software, which focuses on general ledger accounts, focuses on line items of the invoices and every detail in it. Then you're going to get another layer of granularity within the XBRL reports. And I feel like the industry will actually change in the future. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a future looker in any way, but I believe that once XBRL GL becomes more accepted in the market and you see more products coming out in the market here, you're going to see a lot more use cases between accounting software, which has line items and general ledger accounts attached to it, attached to the XBRL data from an analysis perspective. That's my perspective, but let me hand that over to Michael, and maybe he can share a few minutes on that.
Thank you, Aziz. I think you summarized on a high level it in a way we think it can go. There are also different initiatives all around the world into this action. And for example, in the Netherlands, we have an initiative called RGS that's basically also allowing the translation between the financial application, chart of accounts, towards the Xbrl report in more close relation. So I think there are multiple directions in the world happening at this moment where we have a more tight relation to the source system in this way. And I'll hand it over back to you, Aziz.
Great, thanks, Michael. I hope that answers that question, but if it does not, we'll reach out directly via email and make sure that we've answered those questions on that one. Now what I'd like to do is go towards the live event Q&A and talk through those questions also. The first question here that we received was, how does the product manage multiple versions of the same report? And how can the user see which version, for example? Michael, I'll turn this over to you. I'm pretty sure I know the answer here, but I'll let you answer on this one.
Thank you. The application in this case works file-based. That means it's not tracking different versions of the Xbrl report. That means if there is a second version of the report, it should be identified in this case by file name as a differentiator. Then in the file list, we can see based on the file name the different versions of the document. So it's not a document system that you have multiple versions of one document. Now you have multiple versions of the document already in your system, and then you can work each of them individually where the system automatically processes the different validations and produces the reports alongside with that.
Great, thanks, Michael. All right, hopefully that answers that question. I know Michael and the team also does quite a bit on hash code calculation, just to make sure that the content of the report is also unique when it's identified. So there's a lot of work that goes into that when rendering new instances.
That's correct.
Let's move on to the next question here is, does it also validate against business rules? For example, the rules in the SF reporting manual. And I think, Michael, I'd like to take just a quick minute about this, and then maybe you'll have some details here. But I think in general, the way that it works is as long as you have your XBRL instance and it's attached to the taxonomies are produced by the regulatory body. And as long as the two are connected, the rules that are in the taxonomy are then used for the XBRL instance during the validation. So in this example, SF, which has its own reporting manual, has its own type of taxonomy that is applied to the XBRL instances. And again, Michael, just please correct me if I'm wrong, and I've gone off charts here.
No, you did not. That's correct. Nothing to add there on my side. At this moment, I demonstrated the technical validations on the Xbrl level, on core specification, dimensional level, on assertions embedded within the taxonomy, and the rendered output and the duplication and uniformation process. In a later step, also ASAP requirements will be added to one of the steps, so that we can also trigger specific regulatory validations.
Great, thanks, Michael. And I think just as a confirmation, the validations that happen in ASIF are still available in the validation reports. So it's not that it's unreported, it's just how do we classify those validation errors today. Is that correct, Michael?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. I'm glad I have a clear understanding there. Thanks. Okay, I think that answers the questions that were submitted during the live Q&A. I didn't see any new questions pop up during the session, but if anybody has any, feel free to drop that in. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll thank you very much for attending this session. We very much appreciate it. If you do have any further questions, feel free to drop us an email at info@semansis.com, and we will pick that up and we'll respond back to you. Like I said, we have a variety of different channels for getting in touch with us, as well as more stuff that's coming up on our media channels. We'll be having monthly newsletters is our goal, where we'll be rolling out some of the latest updates in Semansis products. And what we'll also be doing is we'll be having a webinar we're planning on every quarter. So if you have any topics, I believe our producer will be sending you a short questionnaire about what you received from this webinar, plus any future topics you'd like for us to speak about. So look forward to that feedback form in your email, and if you could submit it, that would be very useful information for us. And then, of course, you can reach out via any of our social media channels here. I see a few more questions, so before I close, let me try and bring those in also, and I'm just going to publish those. The first question here, and I haven't had a chance to review this, is regarding the earlier question about adding additional business rules. Some organizations do want to add their own rules. Yeah, so I would say this is something that is on our roadmap, but we haven't figured out exactly the best way to implement this. And Michael, maybe you can give some details about what types of business rules we're looking at within our product and what other customers are looking for implementation outside of XBRL rules or filing rules or anything else, what you've thought about here.
Yeah, it's basically adding on company-specific filing rules that are not published by the regulatory or the organizations that manage the taxonomies themselves. So the company has additional rules, especially in the accounting sector. There are a lot of bigger organizations and smaller organizations that have a lot of more checks they want to do and verify based on the Xbrl report. Those are not available from a regulatory embedded within a taxonomy. So additionally, they want to apply them or validate them on the Xbrl report that is provided. And as you currently already said, it's on our roadmap towards the future to make sure and apply custom business rules created by organizations or reporting entity themselves. And one of the options is, if you can extend the taxonomy and define your own rules there, it will automatically be applied in the system, and it's on our roadmap to support that kind of functionality.
Correct. And Michael, you hit on a very good point there about the extension taxonomies. So basically, the way that it can work today is with, like, you can take a taxonomy and extend that taxonomy. And with the extension of that taxonomy is where you could implement certain rules, formulas, different pieces. And as soon as you're using the standards of XBRL to extend your taxonomy, then those rules are immediately applied within the validation processes.
That's correct.
So for us, extension taxonomies is the right way to kind of do business validations. However, we recognize that extension taxonomies can't do everything from a business rule validation. There's some business rules that are very difficult to capture in taxonomies or extension taxonomies in this case, hence why there is a different feature in our roadmap to have something over and above that. Okay. And then going on to the next question here is, what cost savings are possible for a company using XBRL? Wow, that is a slightly complex question. Michael, I'll let you speak on this in just a second. But the reason why I say it's a complex question is what we see is in the industry as a whole, XBRL, a lot of people do XBRL because it's administratively required by the regulatory body. So the cost savings are actually not because you have to do XBRL, but the cost savings are actually what you can leverage by doing XBRL. So our position is that XBRL is really about qualified data, and being able to use and have qualified data is really the power of XBRL. Once you have that qualified data, then in a technical format, which XBRL is, you can enable a lot of different use cases, and each of those use cases have to be evaluated towards cost savings. So in the cases of, for example, what we just showed, compliance, right? We are using XBRL, but we're also adding the process of validation, reporting, and viewing all of these different things, dimensional documents, etc. On a very technical aspect, we're providing that process. So for example, if a user before had to actually look at an XBRL instance in Notepad or Word or something else, now they can use a web tool to do so. And they can use PDFs if they're not comfortable in the web tool, and they can match their XBRL instance to their PDFs so that they can take those offline to do auditing and accounting. So the business benefits there are more so about the actual processes that are enhanced by using technology as opposed to XBRL itself, if you will. And I know that's a difficult answer to kind of say there, but that's my thought there. And Michael, I'll let you speak a few minutes on this.
Yeah, I don't have that much to add because I think you touched many of the topics already in this regards. As soon as the organization also starts integrating more processes in Xbrl using the taxonomies at hand, they also see a lot of cost savings in reusing data for different purposes. It's within the organization, but also towards external reporting. It's one-time administrative actions to make sure the data is correctly tied to Xbrl and then reported it to multiple entities. And there's also a lot of advantages there to gain.
Yeah, and I think there's also some new, ideas in the industry about where to go and how to use. Like, for example, the analysis use cases, I think are I'm not going to say it's, a dream. There are products out there that do this, but effectively use XBRL data for analysis cases where you're talking about business intelligence. You're looking at quarter-to-quarter reporting, or you're looking to annual reporting. Because the data is highly qualified and is structured with the taxonomy, you can enable a lot of these different reporting and analysis scenarios. And when you start stepping into business intelligence with, let's call it, reactive reporting mechanisms into more machine learning and everything else, then you're enabling a whole new use case where you can actively interpret different data sets because XBRL is data heavy. So that's a good thing because it is taxonomy and qualified in this case. Yeah. So there are definitely some benefits, but right now I think really the benefits are slimlining the processes of business reporting. Yeah. I see we have a few more questions, so let me go ahead and publish those also. Published. All right. I think the next one here is, does XBRL benefit the comparability of financial statements? And I think, Michael, you can answer on this one more directly in the context of analysis.
Yeah, it's definitely the case, yes, because the data is attached to a taxonomy, so there is a standard set of rules or definitions that applies here. And in this case, you can much more easily start comparing data of different instances. Even though when there is extension taxonomies and on lower level concepts are added to provide more detail level or of something that is reported, on a higher level, things become much more comparable because we are using a same set of taxonomies There is version information available, so even over multiple years, we can even start comparing in a better way, and then analysis type of products come into place to validate those data in a better way, because it's standardized, conceptual, everything is defined, and that brings a lot of compatibility.
Yeah, I think a lot of when you talk about the use cases, it's using XBRL. The most powerful thing, at least in my viewpoint, besides the obvious things on business reporting, is that it is qualified data. And a lot of people in the technology space, data is usually the biggest issue. Like, are we talking in the same terms? Are we talking in the same language? Are we talking in the same structure? And this is where XBRL excels, because that is all defined for us by the regulatory bodies via taxonomies. So that's where it all comes together, if you will. Okay. I think that covers all the questions that were brought up during the session and also during the Q&A. Hopefully that answers our piece and answers any of the questions. If you have, oh, wait, I see another question here. What I'll do is I'll take this last question offline, but we'll close out the session in a good way, hopefully. But basically, if you have any other questions or concerns, just drop us an email. Again, our email is info@semansis.com, or you can visit our website and look forward to future events that we will be having in the next upcoming quarters. Thanks very much. On behalf of Michael, Whitney, and myself, we very much appreciate you attending today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.